All right. Whenever you're ready, give it a whirl.
This is Eric Recker from Win the Now at ericrecker.com, and you are listening to Vroom Vroom Veer with Jeff Smith, reminding you to win the now.
Perfect. See, you nailed it.
Awesome.
All right, let me hit stop. I'll be right back.
Are you ready to thoughtfully steer away from your revved up, frenzied, and far too often scripted life? Then welcome to Vroom Vroom Veer with Jeff Smith, where he guides you down the road differently traveled by sharing unique experiences with guests who have managed to shift away from a life stuck on cruise control and veered their way into a more authentic and fulfilling one in all sorts of interesting and kind of remarkable ways. Get ready to Vroom Vroom Veer with your differently traveled road chauffeur, Jeff Smith.
Chris M. King, thank you so much for being on Vroom Vroom Veer, and welcome to the show. Let me see if I can talk today. How's it going?
Fantastic, thanks. How are you?
I am well. So you are at statusflow.net. So talk a little bit about what you're most excited about over there at your business today.
You know what we're most excited about right now is that we have opened up a whole suite of service lines to address different clients that are working with different flavors of the seemingly impossible.
Okay.
And so that's what I think we're most excited about right now.
I like that you add in there the seemingly. It's a good thing.
Well, that's right. Things are only impossible until they aren't.
Exactly. Yes. You know, did you see the movie, not the Barbie one, but the other one, Oppenheimer?
Oh, yeah.
That was great, right?
That was intense. Yeah, it was fantastic.
It was awesome. I mean, a little bit more politics than I could have, I could have done away with a lot of the Robert Downey Jr. stuff. Just not really all that interested in that crap. But I like the physics stuff, right? So one of the engineers run in and say, they just did this in Germany. And Oppenheimer says, that's impossible. And then one of the engineers says, I'm going to go do it.
Exactly. But Henry Ford did that too, right? He was like, go make me a small block V8. For 3 years, the engineers were like, can't be done. He's like, I'm not trying to hear that. Go figure it out. 3 years later, they figured it out.
You just got to do it.
You just got to do it.
When people say impossible, they mean, I don't want to do it.
Well, what they
I don't
mean
know
is they
how.
can't see. Yeah, because I mean, look at the Bannister principle, right? All throughout history.
Explain Bannister principle. Here it comes. Okay.
Okay. So all throughout history, no human being had ever run a mile in under 4 minutes. And through the 1900s, this became some kind of obsession that the world had to watch this happen. And the doctors and physicians, the scientists all said, if somebody actually does this, it will kill them. It's not possible.
Wow.
Well, May of 1954, Roger Bannister pulled it off. He ran a mile in under 4 minutes. And after decades
and he didn't drop dead.
This record, right? He didn't drop dead. And not only did he survive, but his record lasted 46 days.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because once he crossed that finish line, the world realized it became possible, and then people started doing it. So it's not, people say seeing is believing. The reality is believing is seeing.
I think you're right. That's a really great story. You are totally right. I'm not thinking anymore. I'm just knowing you're right.
Once you believe something to be a certain way, you will consciously or otherwise seek to prove it. Right? We seek to prove the reality of our understanding. That's just what humans do.
Yeah. Are you an American Ninja Warrior fan?
I've seen it. I haven't watched it in quite some time, but yeah.
It's a really good show. If you ever, have time and you're bored. That's never going to happen. But
I don't know. Fulfilling my potential really is going to cut into my sitting around time.
Amen. But another example was there was this 4'0" gymnast who was the first woman ever to scale that warp wall. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as she did it, all the women were doing it. Right.
Right.
It's the same idea, that can't be done. Right.
Right. It can't be done until somebody does it.
Exactly.
And I mean, look, I live in a town where people pay $30 for avocado toast. If you can make that happen, you can do anything.
$30 for avocado toast.
Ridiculous. People do it. Look, in the 70s, some guy made a pet rock and sold millions, right? I mean,
it's a really good idea. Yes.
Right? Whatever somebody's listening to your show right now and has a really seemingly dumb idea.
Yeah.
It is not nearly as dumb as they think it is.
I'm one more. And so this is Room Beer. That means we have to go back in time and talk about your wonderful childhood. And I'm being like, what's the word? Facetious?
It was great.
It was great. It was great until it wasn't. But so don't let me forget. We got to go back in time. One more thing. Now I've totally, because I'm going to just have to wait. But there's another example that I was thinking of that I've totally brain farted right now. So let's blow that off and go back in time and talk about Chris and your childhood.
Okay.
So you grew up in a wonderful neighborhood. And it was scary as hell.
I grew up in a very privileged neighborhood in a very scary house.
Wow.
My eldest sister died when she was 11 years old.
Oh my goodness.
She was a Down's child. She got leukemia, so she died of cancer. And
yikes.
And so I was very young at the time. I was 13 months old. And so I was raised in a house that really had grief and rage and abuse and addiction. And because these were the coping mechanisms of my father, who was a brilliant man and made a lot of money. But just this is not something that you recover from. There are only humans have what we call emotional set points. And they're usually set by about the time you're 6 years old. This is as happy as you can get, and this is as sad as you can get. There are only two things that are really going to be able to move those emotional set points. One is long-term unemployment. The other is death of a child. And so my other sister and I were raised through that, and that set the stage for really the rest of my life.
Right. It sort of like programmed you in that soup, right? That emotional soup. Right.
Yeah. I mean, if you asked me, when I was 14, how was my childhood? I'd be like, oh, it was great. It was fine, because I didn't even know. I had no frame of reference for what this was.
What your experience was the same as everybody else, as far as you knew, right?
Right. It was just normal, These are the kinds of things that happen in life. And so when somebody was like, that's not normal, I was like, really?
Really? Right.
Yeah. No.
Sure. Scary. So, okay. So you grow up in less than ideal conditions, and then you go out in the world and you've got this, I'm going to go ahead and use a word like maladapted, maybe, set of tools to deal with reality. I don't know. What would you call it?
I mean, there are any number of ways to look at this through a clinical lens, right? You could look at my relationship modeling and say I have insecure attachment styles, right? An avoidant dismissive tends to be my flavor.
Okay.
So it obviously affects my relationships. It affects everything in my world. But ultimately, this was the thing that I was able to alchemize. This is the reason that my company exists today. This is a big part of it,
Okay.
And so when I say you can make anything work for you.
That's true.
As long as you can get out of the mental construct of how much it sucks or you don't like it. Right. It's a question of what can you do with it. It's like, yeah, it sucks. I get it. But what can you do?
These are my cards. How can I win with this hand?
Right. I could say that my childhood was not my fault, quote unquote.
Right.
But as an adult, it is all 100% my responsibility
to deal with it.
Right.
To move on. Right.
Am I going to be identified by this and victimized by it, or am I going to alchemize this and do something with myself?
Right. So let's walk through like what the sorts of things that you did after you left home as a kid. So
right. Well, let's see. I got
there's
married.
a lot of stuff, and it's great.
Right. There's a few
There's
things.
a lot of stuff. I'm looking at it all, and it's all really good. But let's just get the highlights.
Okay. Well, let's see. The highlights are I got married, and my first wife had bipolar. This is in my mid-20s. My first wife had bipolar disorder. So
did you know that going in, or?
I did, but here's the thing about bipolar disorder, particularly in women, is it sort of lays dormant. I mean, unless you have early onset bipolar disorder, it sort of lays dormant until mid to late 20s. And then it really kind of surges.
Gets ragey. Yes.
Yeah. And that's what happened. And so I ended up in an emotionally and physically abusive relationship, which is kind of a weird thing to say as a man. Like, I was an abused husband. It's like, it's really weird. It's kind of a surreal sort of thing.
That's psychological abuse, or was it a physical abuse? I don't know.
Both.
I'm guessing. Both.
Yeah, it was both.
My goodness. Yikes.
Yeah. So that ended. I had, kind of a rebound marriage. I met and married my second wife by about the time I was in my early 30s. And I wasn't healed from my childhood, and I wasn't healed from my first marriage. So I have damage on damage kind of thing. And so somewhere around the age of 36, I decided, maybe I should stop marrying everybody and get my shit together. So
and
stop chasing girls and maybe figure some shit out. Right.
So what did getting your shit together look like for you?
Well, it started with, the first thing I mentioned was really accepting responsibility for my entire life.
That's huge. That's huge. Not a lot of people do
everything.
That. Yeah.
You can't do anything if you are not willing to accept responsibility for it. Think of responsibility as a hyphenated word, right? Yep. Response hyphen ability, your ability to respond.
Now.
And responsibility does not mean fault. It means ownership.
Correct.
When I take ownership of something, now I have empowered myself to affect it. If I'm not willing to do that, then I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm not going to be able to change anything.
Right. It's like you can be responsible for something and not deserve punishment for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And you
it
can
gets
be
kind of like fault and blame get like these rolled in sort of like, and because of that, you are therefore a piece of shit forever. Kind of in parentheses, right?
Right. Well,
and that's
fault
not true.
Involves blame, right? Blame involves victim consciousness. Nothing comes from victim consciousness other than complete disempowerment.
Sure. So did that come from like a spiritual place, or when you decided to take responsibility, just walk us through like, how did that, what were the steps to the aha of going, oh, I need to own this stuff? How did you get there?
The first thing I had this aha moment. I was leaving the house one day for work, and this was after my second wife had left, and I was devastated and all this kind of stuff. And it took me about 3 weeks before I felt like I could breathe again. And it was a bad time.
Lots of fucks and looking for your pants at the end.
It was bad, and I remember leaving the house one day. I opened the door, and this, where I live here in LA, they get the Santa Ana winds, right? And this warm wind blew through the house, and it sort of blew the fog off my head. It was really strange. I mean, in this moment,
really warm air?
Yeah, it was this warm air, and something about it, everything physically looked different. Like the color came back. The sky was intensely blue. The grass was intensely green. And I was like, whoa. And I marched myself down. I was working in the Neuroscience Institute of the hospital for at that point, and I walked into their EAP program. The HR was like, okay, I need to talk to a therapist. And they gave me, they gave me a therapist number. I went in, I did,
That's
and
awesome.
I went to see the therapist for about 3 months, and he said something really cool. He said, I don't think I can really help you. And I said, okay. He said, look, you have figured this out. Because the first day I told him, look, I'm a total narcissist. I'm steeped in victim consciousness. Everything is everybody else's fault. I'm the only thoughts, feelings, opinions that matter. He's like, okay, we can work with that. And so, but what I had, he said, you've had what sounds like what we call a core flip. And you usually take something pretty traumatic, in this case, my second wife leaving me. He says, you've kind of woken up. He says, now you got this, go and do. And the process, to answer your question, was to finally let myself off the hook.
Right.
Step one was stop telling yourself, no matter what you've done, no matter how shitty you've been, no matter, whether you've cheated or lied or stolen or whatever, let yourself off the hook and get curious about, well, this is interesting. Like, I wonder when I started thinking this way. I wonder when I started doing that. And where did that start? Like when you release the judgment of yourself,
right,
and you can get connected and have compassion and get connected to yourself, you can start understand the pathology to this. And then you can start kind of hacking and recoding your system.
That's amazing.
That's how the process starts.
Mine was less dramatic, but I kept hearing this in personal development circles. Like you are 100% responsible for all of your experiences on earth, right? From spiritual people, from atheists, right? Like everybody was the same mantra. And it took me a long time to figure out that was true. And the same thing. It was like, oh, but that doesn't, you have to put a little thing on there. That doesn't mean you're a horrible piece of shit and you're going to hell. Right.
Right.
Right. It's two different things. It's like, it's pretty much everybody has gone through some version of a shitty upbringing, right? Some are definitely more extreme than others, but nobody gets out of childhood clean, right? Zero people.
See, I don't say that. I never tell people I had a dysfunctional childhood, because the implication there is that there's some other kind, you know? I mean,
that's true. That's true. Yeah. I mean, I could go through like I had like a really weird relationship with my big brother, right? And I don't think I ever experienced anger with anyone other than him.
Really?
Yeah. But like, so like I remember just literally wanting to grab a bucket and just bash his brains in. That kind of
What was
rage.
it about him what was it about him in particular that lit you off?
That let me off or set me off?
That lit you up, that got you so heated. Yeah.
Well, he was just constantly picking on me, and I think it was just sort of like that, I don't know, mammalian revenge. Once I got big enough to think I could fight back, flight went away, and I was just like, okay, let's go. So, while I'm 3 years younger than him, he was always bigger than me, right? So I think it was just that was like the difference. It was like, well, if I had a weapon, maybe I could do some damage.
I'm just going to wait until he falls asleep.
Exactly, something like that. Yeah. I mean, we have since gotten over it, we hugged it out. Yes. Yeah.
Nice.
But like, most of the stuff from my childhood, I think I've gotten over, but I don't think I'm still working on shit.
We all are.
Yeah, we all are. Yeah.
I mean, if you're, on that track anyway, and you're seeking to do something with your life or make changes, I mean, it's,
right.
I don't even call it healing anymore. On the west side of LA, we hear a lot of these, west side hippies talking about, I'm healing my issues. I'm like,
right.
At my age, I'm not so interested in healing them. I just need to become aware of them so I can navigate them.
You have to learn to deal with it.
Right. Just deal with it.
This is what I've got. This is my repertoire
right?
of stuff.
Right. Like I mentioned, insecure attachment style, right? It's like, that's probably not going to change in me. So I don't need to fix it. I need to navigate it.
You need to learn to live with it and make it your friend.
Exactly. Again, back to what I said earlier. How can I make this work for me? How can I alchemize this?
Right. That's a good, I like that attitude. It's like, and you're not judging yourself anymore.
No.
I would, as you mentioned, the Santa Ana winds. I lived in the South Bay area for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I went on one of these bike rides that I found on meetup.com with a bunch of strangers. It was awesome, right? First time in my life, I was out, and it was probably like 10, 11 o'clock at night. We're going back to our cars, and this blast of hot air just hits all of us all at once. And I'm like, what the fuck was that? And they're like, wow, that was Santa Ana winds blowing in,
Right.
Yeah. And I was like, wow. And it didn't affect me like it affected you.
Yeah, that was a weird moment. I mean, I don't know if it was the wind or the moment. I don't know what happened, but something in my brain switched and everything changed.
I think the switch had probably already flipped. You just felt it. It was probably the trauma.
I really woke up.
Like the doctor said. Yeah.
Well, and that's when, everything started changing for me. That's when I really, started to change my life. I mean, I said, well, I can pretty much do anything. I was really high on this idea. Even when the marriage came apart, there I am standing in the wreckage of my entire life that I had just really destroyed, quite impressively. There was this spark of hope and freedom. It was like, okay, I now there are no rules. Like I'm wide open now. I'm not locked into anything anymore. And it was from that spark that I just set my life ablaze.
The only limits are the laws of physics.
Even then, we can do things with that.
You can actually. There's a lot of, like I said, that thing from Oppenheimer. There's only like really one thing that they've learned They haven't learned anything new since that movie. Like how to take a neutron and zap it at that other thing, That's
Right.
what they learned, right? Nothing else. There has been nothing new. Well, I guess you could count quantum mechanics as new, but
Right. Well, nothing that they're going to tell us anyway.
probably not. So
everything is energy, everything. And
True.
once you start understanding something about how energy works and subatomic physics, and again, quantum mechanics, as you mentioned, right? You start understanding this, you can start bending reality. Like, we had a client actually, she said to me that she sent me a text. She said, we doubled her revenues, we eliminated her stress, and we saved her marriage. That took 4 months.
Wow.
4 months.
Wow. And that, she'd still be in therapy if she was doing therapy.
You can spend years in therapy, and therapy has its place. My ex-fiance and best friend today is a therapist, and she works with a really difficult population. She works with people with borderline disorders, and she says
hard.
Therapy,
it's hard.
Right. She says, the stuff that we do, while similar in some ways, it's way faster.
Right. Well, you're not dealing with a bunch of sort of like brain sort of chemistry kind of disorders. There's a lot.
No, we're not dealing with that.
You're not dealing with that.
And honestly, I'm not even really dealing with people's past very much. I mean, it sounds terribly insensitive, Jeff, but I say, look, I don't actually care why you are the way you are. Right. At the risk of sounding insensitive,
to know that story, right?
Right. At the risk of sounding insensitive, I don't fucking care, because I'm going to deal with it the same way. You are the way you are, and that's what I'm going to navigate. And so if you really need to know why you are, sure, I'll go dig around in your childhood if you really want to know why. But we can do this a lot faster if we don't have to go there.
Right. You can do that on your own time too. You don't need
right. Go talk to your therapist about it while we're doing this over here. Right?
Exactly.
Let me know what you find out. I'll say that's interesting, and then I'll just keep moving on. Right.
So let's walk through some of these the fun stuff in your backstory. So jobless, penniless, homeless, and you built a business out of your trunk. So let's get into that. So what's it like to be homeless? Where do you poop?
At your friends' houses, right?
There you go. There you go. Right.
I was very fortunate that I had friends that would, let me crash on the couch and things like that. They would feed me, but there were days that I didn't eat, because I just didn't have the money, and so I would ration food. I had like a Starbucks muffin or something, and that's all I was going to have for a couple of days.
Wow.
But it was when I have that level of heat behind me, it's pretty tough for me to fail. Like some people have different, like humans have different tolerances, right? A human system has tolerances, and your system and my system are different. They're going to have different tolerances. So for somebody else, that would have been too much stress, right? The idea of not having a home to go to tonight would have been way too stressful, and they wouldn't be able to function. They wouldn't be able to build a business. For me, if I had some cushy job and was trying to build this on the side, I wouldn't have enough heat. I wouldn't have enough stress to make it happen.
I get you.
And so it's a question of, how does my human system best operate? What are its tolerances? And how can I leverage that to get what I want? And it's often not fun or comfortable, but it's effective.
Yeah, it gets you off the spot. Right. Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
there's no way I could have done this if I had some job that was paying my bills.
Right.
I wouldn't have done it.
So how did you end up in the car building a business out of your trunk? Did you lose a job?
Yeah, I got fired again. I can't work for humans, man. Like, I should not be. I just no.
See, I think your tolerances are opposite of my tolerances. So like we were talking earlier about like working with the special forces people. Yeah. Really super awesome people, right? Mm-hmm. I love them to death. Super funny, just entertaining to no end, right? And I think that a lot of these guys that I worked with were actual combat vets. Yeah. So when they're not in combat, everything's awesome. Right? Right. So you can't get them off of their happy spot when they're not getting shot at. So,
right. They have a different bar.
Right.
They just have a different bar.
Like there was this broken chair on the first day of my deployment right behind my desk. Mm-hmm. Like, you know how like shitty office furniture has like two pieces, like a circly chair spot, and then where the wheels are. Well, those were in like two separate pieces, and it was literally like sheared, so they're not going back together. So this chair is garbage now, right? And weeks went by, and I just like look at the chair going, I guess I'll deal with that at some point. Right. And then out of the blue, one of the many lieutenant colonels in the Army who was like famous, like Army famous special forces guy. I think he was one of those horse soldiers when they first went into Afghanistan.
Oh, wow.
I forgot his name. I think his last name was Mitchell. But anyway, Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, the special forces killer, gets up in my face and goes, what the fuck? It just chews my ass for like a while, and this is typical in the Army, and it doesn't happen all that often in the Air Force. And then he ends with like, and why the fuck is that chair still there? So thank you for giving me an out.
Right.
I don't know where this chair is going, but at least I get to leave.
Right. That's awesome.
As soon as I get back, right, he's back to his ordinary self again,
Right.
Yeah. And I didn't even ask anybody where to put it. I just went and found the nearest dumpster.
Right. Just make it gone.
It's the war. Who cares? The other special forces story that I had was, like I said, I was stationed in England and then sent to Qatar.
Wow.
So I knew how to do a roundabout from England, right? You yield to, I can't remember. Yield to the right if you're in England. It would be yield to the left if you're in the States. So I do that. I come up to the roundabout. Somebody's coming the other direction, and I just start yielding.
Right.
And everybody in I think it was some sort of big SUV, and everybody's in there with me. We're going to the airport to pick somebody up. And they're like, what are you doing? Go, 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 go. And I'm like, okay. So apparently when it doesn't matter where you are or if there are bombs, if you're with special forces people, you drive like a fucking maniac.
Just keep moving.
You're in charge. Right. Well, those people that you're yielding to might want to crash into you with a bomb, theoretically.
Right.
My brain doesn't go there. Right.
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 Yeah, different framework.
I'm a desk jockey. I don't usually think about people trying to kill me with bombs.
Right. Right. Most of us don't live in that reality.
There you go. So, okay. So you get out of the trunk. So how do you build this business? This business that you built out of your trunk, is that statusflow.net?
That is the company that exists today.
Wow. Yeah. Holy shit.
We got coaches that work for me and playing in, coaching and consulting in all different sandboxes. All of us are built to make the seemingly impossible a reality. And that shows up for different ways for different companies and different individuals. For an organization, it's something like, Ford v Ferrari or something where it's like, how do we do this? We've never done it before. We have no fucking idea how. It's like, yep, that's a great call for us. But for individuals, the impossible could be, how do I get out of my soul sucking job and do the thing that I've always wanted to do? Or it might be, how do I double my business? It might be, how do I save my marriage, or how do I end my marriage? Right. I mean, it might be, we have one of our coaches, Avi, who works with what we call the failure to launch kids. The 20 somethings that are still on the parents' payroll and have no idea what they're going to do with themselves. And it's like, how do I get my kid off the couch? It seems impossible,
Right.
And so
there's a lot of people going through that.
Yeah, it's actually, you know what, Jeff? It's like my busiest service line right now. It's
really,
yeah.
Wow.
The busiest, the ones that we get the most phone calls for is I got a 24-year-old that's not really pulling it in college, or maybe out of college, or doesn't know what to do.
He's got a shitty job, or he works.
He or she may or may not have a job. Circle of friends isn't great, or whatever, and
basically just playing video games all day.
Yeah, and they just don't know what to do with themselves or how to do it. And so we got that. But my clients are, that's Avi's client, his client, one of his client populations. My client population are professional women that are overwhelmed, burned out, and kind of irritated with their spouse. That's my client. Pure and simple. Her business and her life is running her instead of the other way around.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, and then we flipped the switch. You know, one of my teachers said, his name is Dr. Robert Holden, said, if there's something missing from your life, it's probably you. I thought that was pretty profound. And that's exactly what a lot of these women are reporting, that they get leftovers of their own life. I'm like, yeah, that's not good. Let's fix that.
Yeah. Well, and I think everybody gets into that. Like, you spend so much time like figuring out what other people want, and you don't know what you want, maybe.
Well, their orientation is elsewhere. Like, as a man of my generation, I'm pretty high on my priority list. I'm top 3 most of the time, right?
Sure.
A woman of that, 38 to 54, she is dead last on her priority list. Everything else comes first. The job, the husband, the kids, the house, her mom, the car. She's getting leftovers of her own life. And she's like, this sucks.
Yeah,
like, yeah, it does. Yeah. Let's fix that.
Yeah, don't do that.
It's shockingly simple. It's not easy, mind you, but it's simple.
The answers are simple, right?
Yes.
You have to prioritize yourself, take some shit off your plate, take care of yourself. You could sum it up by saying, put your mask on first.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
That's a really big part of it. Just like put your mask on first. You are the foundation of your entire life.
Right.
And if that is not solid, your entire life is on a shaky foundation.
Right. You're not
like, this is not complicated.
Right.
Right. And so it's like, okay, we get it. Yeah, but how? Like, well, that's where we come in.
There you go. So let's talk about mind fuckery, because I just like saying mind fuckery.
That's what it is, man.
Thanks for making up a really cool word that I can say on my podcast. Mind fuckery. What is it? Why is it so important?
Well, I mean, and that's the title of, and I resisted that name, by the way, for like a month. My CMO was like, you got to call the podcast Mindfuck. I'm like, okay, you need to stop. But he was right because
Okay.
Because when you start, let me frame that a little differently. When somebody starts to realize that they are the sole creator of their entire reality, and that reality is the end result of a system, and they recognize that they can start recoding that system, they can change their reality. It blows your mind.
Right.
When you achieve that which you thought you couldn't, it's like, no fucking way. It's a mind fuck. And so much of this is counterintuitive.
Right.
Like,
okay.
it's, like, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Here's a perfect example of a counterintuitive thing. I go into some executive's office.
Okay.
And she's working 60 plus hours a week, burning the candle at both ends.
Right.
And she's on the hamster wheel, work more hours to get more done. Like, you really want to get more done? Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to cut her back to about 32 hours a week. And she's going to get 3 to 5 times as much done as she did working 60. If you want to get more done, you don't work more hours. You work fewer hours. Completely counterintuitive.
Right.
But that's how it works. And this is when we started getting into subatomic physics and quantum theory and blah, 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 right? All the things. But that is how it works, because a task will expand or contract in its time frame according to what you think it's going to take.
Totally.
So if you think it's going to take 6 hours, it will. If you think it's going to take 3 hours, it will. What you're holding in your consciousness is what is going to produce the reality. So when I go into an organization, they say, we want to, grow our business. The last thing I want to see is the KPIs and the market trends and the sales history. I don't want to look at that shit because it's going to screw up my framework. So if I can adjust what the executive team believes is possible, I'm going to change the reality a lot faster than dealing with the KPIs.
That's amazing. I think that
it's wild.
The first time I experienced that was I was lucky enough to have a job in the military in LA Air Force Base in El Segundo.
Oh yeah, that's really close to where I am right now.
Yeah, so whenever we could, it didn't happen all the time, but typically, Fridays in the summer were kind of slow, right? So if there was like time to do it, the boss would come in, my boss, and say, if you can get away with it, now if you've got anything going on that you need to stay and finish, do that. But if you can let people go, start letting them leave at noon. And I was like, do you have anything for me to do for them before I let them leave? And they go, no, but I think you should.
That's funny.
Does that make sense?
This is feeling like a setup here. Wait a minute.
Well, so he's saying, like, I go in the morning and say, like, I would get a whiteboard and say, you have to clean this, you have to straighten up that, somebody has to do clean the supply room or the storeroom or whatever. It was just a bunch of things like chores, right?
Right.
And the faster it's done, we can leave, right?
Right.
Right. So if any of this stuff isn't done, somebody's saying to do it. Oh my God. I would say, okay, we can leave at noon today. If all of this shit's done by noon, it was done by 10:30.
Right. Right.
And they're like, hey, it's done. Can we leave now?
you give really challenging tasks to lazy people and tell them the sooner they get it done, the lazier they get to be. Right?
That's a good answer. I like that. But
right?
it did compress the time, right? It was like,
yes.
That's what, and they always got it done and they always left at noon, you know?
Yeah, and that's actually the word that I use is, I talked about human systems and tolerances. When I say human system, I'm talking mind, body, spirit, right? This whole human being, right? And human systems need the right, your word compression, you know? And this is going to be different human to human, right? Some people, I had this client that called me up, he's a CEO, and he said, he hired me because he said, I need to get my mojo back. Well, his mojo was fine. He didn't have enough compression. I said, you just got too much time on your hands. So I just compressed his timelines. He was on fire.
Wow. That's
so
awesome.
Having the right compression, which is exactly what you did. You were able to do that and say, oh, I'm going to compress the timeline and set him on fire. Cool.
I like it. I love it. Another thing I just learned from a book I'm reading that I like, and I bet you already know this one, but like, the idea was to review regrets and just like I had this regret. I don't want to get into the details, but it's been nagging at me forever. Right.
Okay.
And every once in a while you kind of like wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go, oh, I fucked that up so bad. Right. One of those. Right. So it suggested that you just like write it all out in a note. So Google Keep is like my friend. It's like where I put all my notes. So I just put, UDM regrets. What should I have done? What did I do? What did I fuck up? Yeah. And I just listed it all out. And now when I think of that regret, I actually feel better about it. If that makes any kind of sense.
It does because
I owned it all, right?
When you can own it and let yourself off the hook and how you relate to the issue is the issue. And when you're relating to something as regret, it's like I fucked up. I owe, this. It has a very low frequency.
Right.
When you look at it through the lens of gratitude for the learning, now you've really raised the frequency. And so, and I can look. I'm going to give you a magic trick right here.
I like magic tricks.
This is one of my favorite things. I can sum up every regret. Every mistake you have ever made, I can sum up with one line from The Magnificent Seven. It was 1960. Steve McQueen plays
great
Vin.
Movie.
Great movie. And he said, this guy says, why'd you take the job? And McQueen says, a fellow I once knew in El Paso took off all his clothes and jumped in a mess of cactus. I asked him the same question. Why? He said it seemed to be a good idea at the time. I can sum up every mistake you made with that line right there. It seemed to be a good idea at the time.
Right.
Because it did. Now, you can play Monday morning quarterback all you want and be like, yeah, but that, no. In that moment, that seemed to make sense for whatever reason.
Right. And you have a choice.
You can
that's
choose,
right.
You can choose to let yourself off the hook and be like, okay, lesson learned. Good.
I won't be doing that again. That was a bad idea.
It did not go how I thought. Sometimes I even think, now, when did I think that was going to work? At some point, apparently I did.
That's a good one. I like that.
Right?
Yeah. So
I got a buddy from the South, and he says, what the most famous last words are in the South? I said, what's that? He says, hey, y'all, watch this.
So true. So true.
Because, he says, we just get dumb ideas and do it.
I was in Florida. You're getting a lot of military stories. Something about you and me. So this is one of the most unsafe acts I've ever done in my Air Force career. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like a bad idea at the time, but there was there was a lot bigger people. There was I was with 8 other dudes, all bigger than me, right? Mm. And so we're moving this colonel's jacuzzi that weighs 3,000 pounds. Totally illegal. Not supposed to do that. Okay. Doing it anyway. We get it on the truck just fine, right? Mm. And we did it smart. We used levers. It was a very safe procedure getting it on the truck. We go to the new house and we're like, how are we going to get it off the truck? Oh, we should have.
Didn't think that one all the way through.
No. So the brilliant plan they come up with was we all grab a hunk of jacuzzi, right? That's hanging off the edge. Yeah, you're already laughing.
What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? We all grab a hunk, right? And then the guy drives the truck away. Yeah.
Oh my.
Dumbest idea ever, right? So I'm like, guys, this is a really bad idea. I'm voting no. And they're like, well, what do we do? And I'm like, I'm not sure, but I think it involves one end at a time, right? Would have been better, right?
Right. It doesn't sound like it could be worse.
Right. So anyway, we did that. And I just decided to kind of be half on and half off because I knew what was going to happen. Physics. It was just physics was going to happen. And so,
gravity.
Gravity. Right. So it crashes down as physics does, as gravity works. So I think it brushed my shoulder. So I got mild abrasions, but another guy was actually bleeding. So ooh. Yes. And then it was on the ground. So then we picked it up and, finished the job.
Well, problem solved. Well done to you.
Seemed like a bad idea at the time. I just couldn't get out of it.
The T-shirt that I've seen, it says, "That's a terrible idea. What time?"
That's right. I heard another one. I went to Japan just recently with my wife because she's from Japan.
Nice.
So we go, right. And we went to one of these semi-active volcanoes, right?
Semi-active.
So it's smoking. It's not erupting. Okay.
Right.
But, so smoking volcano means more or less active, right?
Right.
So there's warnings in the brochure. You can get to the rim, but we can't promise you'll be able to get to the rim on any given day, right? So you may pay to get to the rim and not be able to go to the rim.
Okay.
Because there's a chance the toxic poisonous gas fumes levels will be too high.
Right.
So we get there and there's a guy and he's like, come on, let's get to the rim. And I'm like, this does not bode well. So, so as we're walking up to the smoking hole and the rim, we're both coughing and we have masks on, right?
Oh, gee.
Yeah. So we're there 5 minutes. We take our pictures. We do the thing. We're walking away. Literally 3 minutes later, merp, 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 and every language imaginable. Please evacuate the rim area. Wow. So I wanted to get a T-shirt that said something like "Safety Third."
Rough. I got to tell you, a big part of my job is tracking patterns, and I'm seeing one with you, right?
Yes.
The patterns of bad ideas.
Yes, I have a lot of bad ideas. I could go on.
But that's where all the cool stories come from. You know, you get no good stories from good judgment.
Thank you. That turned out to be a really bad idea, but at least I have a good story.
You have good stories, and you're here.
And I didn't die. There you go.
And you didn't die. See, I thought you were going to say, they said that they were going to tell you, we can't guarantee that you're going to get to the rim. We also can't guarantee that you're going to get back.
It worked out. It all
right?
worked out. Yeah. So, okay. So let's talk about this showdown of soul versus ego. Because I love getting into the idea of anything spiritual. So,
Okay.
and the quest for authenticity. I like that. Yeah. So talk about it.
Well, you have your human animal and you have your human spirit. And these things are often in disagreement.
Right. I know what my human animal wants to do all the time.
Right?
Yes.
You know, and the idea is if I can get my soul and my animal to agree, well, great. I'm aligned and things will happen a lot easier, you know. But the my framework is pretty simple, is that and this is where I can get a little Joe Dispenza on this, but that we're not humans that have souls. Okay. That's not my framework. My framework is more that we are souls having a human experience.
Right. I like that better too.
Right. And Dispenza says something along the lines of, you are an eternal soul having a spiritual experience on the physical end of the energetic spectrum.
Okay. I like that.
Right. Because energy is a spectrum, right? So it's pretty nerdy. It's a little, and I agree with it, right?
Yeah. It
because
works.
again, everything is energy, right? So I look through a very binary lens at the end of the day. I don't work in constructs of good or bad or right or wrong, right? You know, get really Hamlet here. For nothing is either good nor bad. Thinking makes it so. Right?
True.
It's a subjective construct. So it's a question of, am I aligned or misaligned with the experience I want to have, with the goals that I want to achieve? It's that simple. Aligned or misaligned, working or not working.
Right.
That's it, right? So, and I look at organizations, at C-suite executives or whatever, working and not working, effective or ineffective, you know?
Right.
And I ask people, do you want to be right or do you want to win? Do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? Do you want to be right or do you want to achieve the thing you said you wanted?
Right.
It's that simple.
Yeah, you don't actually get paid for being right.
No. I used to want to be right. This is a big thing. Look, and everything I've learned is because I fucked it up somewhere along the way. Okay. Like I did not come out of a box this way. All right. That was a fucking mess. And so it's like, I mean, I've screwed up in pretty much every way a man can, in relationships, in jobs, and what, like, I've done it all. I'm sort of surprised I'm alive with some of the dumb shit that I've done.
Yeah.
But that is how I've learned this, is that I've
It's the best
experienced
way
it,
to learn.
been there, done that, right? You know, and I've made the impossible a reality many times in my life. And I'm just committed to doing that with others now.
I love it. I love it. So how can folks best get in touch with Chris M. King? I know we've got statusflow.net.
Yeah, statusflow.net.
Right.
We've got the Instagram. The Instagram thing is the status flow. Those two are the easiest ways to get a hold of us. You know, we got the email and phone is on the website and everything.
Perfect. This has been a blast. You got anything? Any more stories you want to regale us with?
Oh man, I could tell you. I'll tell you my favorite.
We may need another show down.
Yeah, we could do that on another time, right?
No, please go ahead. I mean, if you've got time.
Well, when I say you can make anything happen, you really can. When I was 22 years old, I decided that I wanted to be an NCAA ice hockey player, and there were only two things. There were the only two things standing in my way. Thing number one was that I was failing out of my junior college. I was on academic probation, and thing number two was that I'd never skated before a day in my life.
That's a problem.
Right? No problem. Fast forward 18 months, I'm leading my team into the state championships, fourth in goals and first in assists.
And you had to learn how to skate first.
I had to learn how to skate. I had to learn how to do everything, right?
Wow.
By the way, we got our asses handed to us. We did not win the state championship.
That's okay. You got there.
Right. But
that's
we got
huge.
It. And
that means you're number 2 in the state.
When you start challenging what you think is true, what you think is reality, when you stop advocating for the status quo, when you stop advocating for your limitations and you start advocating for what you really want and start questioning, how might I be able to do it? Yeah, I know it's impossible, but what if it's not? What if maybe there's a way? What might that look like? You have a physiological effect on your brain. You're physically changing the way the brain works. It opens the creative centers, and this is how we start to move the needle and making dreams come true.
Right. I like it.
It's just getting your psychology, your physiology, and your energy all working for you instead of against you. You do that, you make magic happen.
That sounds fun.
It's a lot of fun.
It seems like you're having fun.
I'm having so much fun. It's not easy though. My clients cry a lot, which I love, but
They cry in a good way, right?
Yeah, well, it's like I've been there, done that. Right. Call it personal development is a function of personal destruction. If you want to build a brand new casino in Vegas, you're going to have to blow the old one up first.
True.
And it's not fun.
No. Yeah. It takes a long time.
It's actually faster than you think. You got to be strategic about it so you don't create collateral damage. But when you do it consciously, do it consciously with intention, the world changes.
Excellent. Chris, this has been a blast.
Thank you so much. Great to speak with you.
Reach out again in 6 months or something. Bring more stories. We'll hang out.
All right. Sounds good, man.
All right, brother. So
thank you.
Let me hit stop. But
thanks for taking the time to ride along with us on another episode of Vroom Vroom Veer. For podcast info and show notes, be sure to head over to vvveer.com. That's VVER.com. Man, that's fun to say. And we'll catch up with you next time here on Vroom Vroom Veer.